Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today I'd like to continue on with our journey, yours and mine, through the recent releases made by the Criterion collection during this year of 2020. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on that title, which has been designated the Criterion Collection spine number 1053. This is a film from 1950. The director's name is Henry King, and it stars Gregory Peck. This is the film which is called The Gunfighter. This Western film is from 1950, and it's directed by Henry King, and it stars Gregory Peck as Jimmy Ringo. And my goodness, what a bold and stunning and quietly moody work this is on many fronts. I think it's a film that so skillfully and so deftly seems to strike the perfect balance between that which is cool and that which is dark and brooding. That is, I think, the essence, as far as I see it anyway, of this brilliant work of cinema, The Gunfighter. Now, as I say, it is a Western, and I think if we were to try, or I were to try to boil it down to its very essence in general terms, I would say that it is a film about a particular figure here, Jimmy Ringo, as I say, portrayed by Gregory Peck, and his myth and the legend that surrounds the man, and how people in a particular community react to that, either positively or most of the time quite negatively, and how his shadow, the shadow of his legend, seems to follow him to the point where he is in a place where he is yearning for some kind of change, some kind of shift, away from the shadow of his legend and more towards something that is akin to companionship, love, and family. And the point of the film, I think the very core of the narrative thrust of the film, is whether or not he can achieve this kind of satisfaction, of this sense of yearning, and why it is he feels this way, and the types of moral ambiguities that are populating the world and the space along the way. And indeed, when I say world and the space, I mean both externally, in terms of the actual physical environment that is being portrayed here, and also internally, which is the landscape, the map of the human heart, and the spirit that is also filled, I dare say, with this sense of moral ambiguity. Although there is also room for a sense of yearning, for a sense of wanting something other than what we currently have right now. And so I think this is in essence what is going on in The Gunfighter. And so I think we can already ascertain that this film is a remarkable Western film by virtue of a lot of factors or a lot of points. First of all, it is a film which is called The Gunfighter, and yet it is portraying a situation that relies a lot on the idea of waiting, the idea of contemplating, the idea of brooding, the idea of focusing on regret, but also trying to find some light in the future. And in that, there is a lot of conversation, there is a lot of waiting, there is a lot of talking about the past, and also there is a lot of seeking answers, both in the present and beyond, which is to say, in other words, that this film relies a lot, pursuant to its structure, on the idea of contemplation and on the idea of a sense of atmosphere and paced thought. And so this is to say also, therefore, that this film, while it does have its share of action scenes and quite exciting and oftentimes very suspenseful action scenes, this is also a tale about brooding and contemplation and regret. And the film really focuses quite masterfully on this type of portrayal. And so I think in that sense, it could be seen to be a film that might be not necessarily following the trends of what one might consider to be an action-adventure type of Western. Although I must say that there are moments of action and violence that are being portrayed, but that's part of the skill of this film, is not only the reliance on the mode of contemplation, but also the way in which the film tries to link or figure in the flashes or episodes of violence that occur into these modes of contemplation, thus making the acts of violence that we see something that have real not just physical consequence, but also emotional and spiritual consequence at that, which is therefore to say that everything has consequence in the world that we see in the Gunfighter. Everything is contemplative. Everything has to do with regret. And I think once we realize that, then we realize as viewers that we are in for a very atmospheric and a very methodically paced film indeed. One that also has its share of action, that's for sure, but one that is also very purposeful in what it is it's trying to say. And I dare say too that what it seems to be trying to indicate is this idea of a sense of the unknown, the sense of a kind of regret, and the sense of the toll that certain actions that one takes, and also the kinds of reputation that can follow one, the kind of toll that can have on one's character, on one's sense of self, and on one's own sense of worth, as well as on one's own spirit and soul and moral compass. And there comes a point where one has to say, can I go on any further, or is enough really enough? And I think there is that sense, not just in physical terms, but also in emotional terms as well, which is, I think, a great landscape by which one can, through cinematic terms, explore something about the human spirit, which is, I think, what is at the heart of this film, The Gunfighter. And what I love, too, is this has a Western sense about it. Of course it does, but it also has this idea of a kind of film noir type of human exploration, and the sense of hopelessness, but also the sense of hope in the context of hopelessness, which I think is a very important concept. And it's the kind of drive, a humanistic drive, that also makes the characters that we see in this film very human, all too human, and very relatable and understandable. Even when we get their stories about their pasts, even when we get the feelings of regret that obviously plague what it is they're feeling and thinking, still, there's always something of the identifiable and accessible in terms of the brilliantly portrayed human nature. As I say, the idea of hope, even in the sense of the hopelessness. And so I'm always very impressed whenever I see this film, The Gunfighter, and I'm also marvel at its technical aspects. There is this way in which the use of time, or the feeling or treatment of time and the passage of time in this film, is a very important character. And it is it is given such weight and import to the extent that it is also reminding us as viewers that we are experiencing something, and we sense this idea of fate, the what might be also called the inexorable, the unavoidable. At the same time, we are always hoping, and we are always rooting for our quote-unquote hero to succeed. And I think this kind of tension that is generated, I think, is quite masterfully achieved. And it's done through the, as I say, the treatment of time, but also the use of close-ups and the way that light seems to be withdrawn, but also applied most subtly. And also the way that the framing works. There is a certain sense of calm, and there is a certain sense of restrained nobility in the way that the story is being presented. There's nothing at all flashy or overly eccentric about what it is that is being portrayed here. Everything feels very contemplative, it feels very calm, and it feels very methodical. And I think that gives rise to a profound sense of loss and a profound sense of regret, because we are given more time to think and to ponder and to wonder and to really sit down and think back. And I think this is, very much tied to the way that the characters in the film also are forced to think and feel and contemplate in this environment where time seems to be stretched out on the one hand, but it is ticking away towards some kind of inexorable conclusion. This is another way to say that I think The Gunfighter is a kind of marvel. It seems to be a Western, but it seems at the same time to be a deconstruction of this kind of heroes and villains myth that I think is a very appealing part of action hero, action adventure Western style films. This is a film that is really taking that and seemingly putting it on its head and giving us a sense of the underside of that. And at the same time, we are following the story. It is a very compelling story. It has components that are easy to follow, that are very clearly delineated, and very wonderfully portrayed. So in other words, there is something of the accessible and the identifiable, and at the same time, when we are consumed by this piece of wonderful cinema, we realize that the world is indeed a very ambiguous and nuanced and complex place whose questions don't yield answers all too easily, but we still try to find a sense of hope, even where there might seem to be little, if any, at all. So this is, I think, the essence of the film, The Gunfighter. What a remarkable film, a remarkable Western, a remarkable performance, a remarkable film all around, and it's great to have it like this in the Criterion collection. Speaking of which, we have this particular Blu-ray, which is a great Blu-ray to have. It is purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration with uncompressed monaural soundtrack. It looks great, it sounds great, and it's what can I say? It's just another wonderful addition to the Criterion collection with a wonderful presentation to boot. And that is not all, of course, because as with many other Criterion collection releases, this one has a number of supplements that I think are very worth checking out. The first is a 22-minute one-on-one interview by the Criterion collection with Gina Telleroli. And this is her take on Henry King and The Gunfighter. And so her comments are really, really stellar. They really are. She talks about certain production details leading up to the making of this film, the involvement of other people in terms of the story, de Toth, and also the John Wayne, Gary Cooper, and ultimately we have Gregory Peck in this role, and we have to think what kind of film, for example, could this have been had it been an actor other than Gregory Peck? It's really interesting to think about. But at the same time, we realize again through her great comments that Gregory Peck was really the best choice for this film. And also, she talks about Henry King and the type of nuanced and brooding sense of storytelling style that is not overly flashy, but it is very inherent and earnest and very true to form. And so this is, and you can tell she is really admiring this work, and she recalls the idea that this is a film that is a Western, but it is also borrowing on traits of film noir. It is also relying on the idea of deconstruction of the Western myth, but also purporting certain proponents, if you will, of the Western genre as a whole. So it's doing a lot of things at once. And I think Gina Telleroli's comments are very stellar and very insightful along these avenues of conversation. So this is an essential, a great interview to have, approximately 22 minutes. And then that's not all, because then we have a video essay by J.E. Smythe. And this is wonderful because J.E. Smythe focuses in on one of the key filmmakers that was responsible for The Gunfighter, and also one of the key filmmakers of this particular period of Hollywood cinema, and also working with Henry King, etc. And that's the editor, Barbara McLean. And so this essay by J.E. Smythe focuses in on the career and history of this important editor, Barbara McLean, and it talks about her early career, and then her and working with many people throughout her career, including Darryl F. Zanuck, and also how she became a very influential voice in the filmmaking of many films that were made up to 1950. So that her role was not just strictly speaking an editor, but also it was having to do with a lot of choices about technical aspects of the filmmaking. It describes her being on set a lot of the time in order to be able to make certain decisions in terms of what to shoot that would help in the editing process, etc. So she is described, I think quite rightly, to be a very influential voice in the filmmaking process. She was also a very skilled editor, and I think, for example, the film The Gunfighter has some brilliantly edited scenes, so many wonderfully edited scenes. But for example, I think there are some great scenes of action that are edited so precisely and yet so with such peculiarity, and I mean that 100% positively, such peculiarity, so as to make us realize that what we are seeing is in essence a kind of non-action while we are seeing action. And I think that sounds if that sounds almost like a paradox, I mean it as a paradox, because it is to suggest that her editing style is imperceptible on the one hand, and yet so fast and quick and full of meaning on the other. And I think and we're seeing all of that on display in the film The Gunfighter. So this visual essay by J.E. Smythe, so important and so wonderful to have, again focusing on Barbara McLean, and also her working relationship with many people, including Henry King as well. So that's one great one to have, approximately 22 minutes. But that's not all, because then we have two audio excerpt interviews. The first is an excerpt recording from 1971, and this is Thomas Stempel interviewing Henry King. And again, these are audio excerpts from the interviews. So this overall, the supplement is approximately 35 minutes, and we get a one-on-one interview, audio only, but we get a picture of Henry King as we were listening to this audio. And it's going through, I think, in quite great detail about his working relationships, working on set, working with Zanuck, and working with actors and particular, almost very, very detailed behind-the-scenes type of stuff. As well as his kind of philosophy, if you will, of the day-to-day needs and necessities of filmmaking during this time. This is absolutely brilliant, and you need to listen to this. You really need to listen to it. There's so much detail. The minutia is all on display here, so it's invaluable, absolutely essential. The audio interview excerpts from with Henry King. And then the fourth supplement is, again, it's Thomas Stempel audio interview, and this time it's again with Barbara McLean. And so we have her audio discussion, again with a picture of her in a kind of great editor type of pose, working with film. This is from 1970, and we have her discussion of her career working both in the editing room and also on set, how she ended up becoming an editor and working with many filmmakers like Darrell of Zanuck and Henry King, etc. This is approximately 30 to 34 minutes, so it's nice and long and robust. This is another essential supplement to listen to. And so it's wonderful that the Criterion Collection has the Henry King interview and then the Barbara McLean interview, audio excerpts interviews like they have here. These two are really great to listen to, so you've got to listen to it if you haven't already. And then we have the booklet. Now, I've already taken the liberty to take out the booklet from the inside. We have, of course, the outer case of the Blu-ray case right here. Really interesting artwork, if I do say so myself. We have the font, which is, of course, seemingly borrowing from the type of font that is used on the titles. And then we have the rendering of Gregory Peck, the use of black and white, and also the use of the color red. Most interesting. And, of course, the idea of the saloon, which is a very important place that is being depicted in the film. And we have this artwork motif that is continued on. We have, again, the use of red and the close-up and Gregory Peck. Note that mustache, too. The mustache is also an interesting point in and of itself that is mentioned as part of the production details in parts of the supplement. So take a listen to that if you haven't done so already. Very interesting. And then we have the notion of the clock, which is a very important motif. Again, the treatment of time in this film is an integral part of it. It's one of these fold-outs, and so in the past I have spoken about my feelings about the fold-out leaflet rather than the stapled booklet, so there's that. But of course, that still means that we can get a great essay, and the essay here, K. Austin Collins' essay, You Can't Go Home Again. Wow, wow, wow. I love the essays by Criterion, or the essays that are released on the Criterion releases. And here is another great one, my friends. You've got to check this one out if you haven't already. It goes through a lot of detail in terms of the plot. It has a lot of treatment of the themes. And there is this idea of comparing the Western film to other Westerns of note. John Ford Westerns come into the equation, I think, and they are included in the essay rather skillfully. And it's also about the way that Henry King, is employing his cinematic style and how it's servicing the plot and the overall thrust of the film to its inevitable conclusion. So another essential essay, really great to have. So I recommend it wholeheartedly if you can check it out. But that is the in essence, that is what we have with the Gunfighter. Now, as I say, in past releases with Criterion, we've also noted where there's a commentary track, where there is not. Here, unfortunately, there isn't any commentary track, and perhaps to some, the number of supplements might seem to be relatively few, especially when compared to other past Criterion releases. But I do want to assure you that what we are getting in terms of the actual substance of the supplements themselves, what we are getting is fantastic. It's fantastically presented, and also it's very detailed. I would point your attention to, for example, those audio interviews, which are very detailed, and they go into, they have a lot of name drops, and it's almost like a who's who of this kind of Hollywood production history. And so for anyone who is really in love with the details of this sort, I think you're going to love these interviews. So that's my way of trying to show as an example just how potentially deep and detailed these supplements go, despite the fact that one might see only, say, just a relatively few amount of supplements listed. Still, the substance of the supplements is something that I think is worth remembering. So this is, in essence, what the Criterion release is of this great film starring Gregory Peck, which is called The Gunfighter. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I really appreciate it. I really hope that you are well during these times. Please continue to stay strong and stay safe. And cheers.